All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Stretch. I'm the founder and lead maintainer of the NetBox open source project. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on what is our first of what we expect to be a monthly community call. So this is something that NS1 is hosting with myself. And joining me today is Mark Coleman, who recently joined the team at NS1 as general manager of NetBox.
Nice to meet you all.
And today we're just going to be going through just sharing some information about what we're doing with NS1 and NetBox, both on the open source and commercial side. So thanks all for attending. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into it. So again, my name is Jeremy Stretch. This is Mark Coleman with me. So I guess first off, what are these community calls? So as I mentioned, these are going to be virtual meetings held monthly by NS1. With the intent of keeping doing a better job, I guess, of getting the community engaged and informed about what we're doing. And the intended audience here is really anyone who has used NetBox, is using NetBox now, or is thinking about using it in the future, just to kind of keep people engaged with what's going on. So today we're going to be talking about first some updates around the NetBox roadmap. So we've got 3.2 coming up. We'll be talking about that. Some initiatives here with NS1 and NetBox, and specifically what Mark will be doing. We'll talk a little bit about improvements that are coming to the plugins framework. So that's the NetBox plugins framework that exists today. I think it was introduced back in like 2.10 or something like that. We've got a number of exciting extensions that are going to be introduced in 3.2, and some opportunities to get involved in the project. So we get questions a lot about, I use NetBox. How can I help contribute to it? What can I do? Whether or not I know development, software development, and finally we'll be taking some pre-submitted community questions. All right, so first off, roadmap updates. We announced recently that we are going to commit to a schedule that happened kind of coincidentally. For the last couple of years, we've been pushing minor releases, so that's 2.11, 3.0, 3.1, etc. We've been pushing them every April, August, and December. And we figured out, that's actually probably a pretty good cadence, so we're going to commit to that. We're going to make that official. So you can expect NetBox 3.2 to come out in April, 3.3 in August, and 3.4 in December. Until we decide to move to a 4.0 release at some point in the future. So hopefully that will provide a little bit more predictability around deployments and understanding, okay, when is the next NetBox release going to come up? Should I upgrade now, or should I wait for a bit? That said, 3.2 is actually is mostly complete already. I was able to get a lot of work done, fortunately, over the holiday break, and most of the work right now is focusing on the plugins framework, which we'll talk about in a second. But look for a beta release in, honestly, probably early February. I think I'm going to try to get something out a little bit earlier, just so that because we are doing so much work on the plugins framework, I'd love to allow more opportunity for people to test that and provide some feedback. So we're probably going to do a slightly extended beta period. Normally we do about a month, around 30 days or so, prior to the actual the final release of the minor release. So this will give people plenty of time to update their plugins, and I'll be helping with that as well, and providing feedback about, we missed something we missed or didn't think about that might need to be extended before the final release. Beyond the plugins framework, coming in 3.2, we've got a bunch of stuff. So the plugins framework stuff is all captured under 8333. We've got an awesome working group that I'll touch on in a moment about what we're doing there. Beyond that, we've finally introduced modules and module types. So this is if you have a chassis-based switch, like Juniper EX9200, for example. You've got the chassis, and then all the components, all the stuff that actually does the work inside it, are field replaceable units. So like line cards and power supplies and stuff like that. Now NetBox will be able to model line cards. So basically, just like you define a device type, you can define a module type in NetBox, put on interfaces or whatever else is on there, and install that into a device. And when you do that, the assigned interfaces or other components automatically get renamed to fit the slot into which they're installed. So that's pretty cool. Custom object field. So this is expanding the concept of a custom field to be able to relate to other objects in NetBox. If you're familiar with Django, the parlance is like generic foreign key. So basically being able to reference any other object from as a custom field, which is pretty cool. I know people have been itching for that for a while. We've also got configurable status choices. So now NetBox will ship with default statuses for objects like site or device that, the statuses might be active, planned, staged, retired, etc. This is the ability to add your own statuses and to override what's provided by the defaults. Service templates, so just a more convenient way of applying or assigning services to devices and virtual machines. Services in this context are protocols basically running on the device or VMs like HTTP, SSH, etc. Automatic VLAN provisioning. So this is pretty cool, being able to automatically provision the next available VLAN out of a range, for example. And then inventory item roles and templates. So this brings inventory items up to more up to par with the other type of component templates that are out there, as well as establishing the ability to assign a role to individual items within a device. Cool. With that, I'll hand it off to Mark to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about what he'll be doing at NS1 and how he'll be interacting with NetBox.
There is the unmute button. Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. Hello, everybody. My name's Mark. That's me up at the top right on a beach pre-COVID. I joined NS1 working on NetBox on January 4th of this year. So I'm still very much getting up to speed. And I'm going to be working directly with Jeremy on NetBox Cloud, NetBox support, and basically all things NetBox as we start to scale things up over here. I guess my first request of the day, one of the things I've been doing is getting up to speed on the community, trying to get more involved there. But I don't want that to be just limited to Slack. So if you've got questions, or if you just want to say hi, or talk about networking or NetBox or anything else, feel free to reach out, email. You can follow the things I'm saying on Twitter. Go and find me on LinkedIn if that's your bag, or jump into the NetBox community Slack. I've been a little quiet in there so far, but I'm hoping to explode onto the scene by closing my first issue this weekend. I have to admit, I've been getting a bunch of support from Jeremy on that one. It's been a little while since anyone paid me to code, but it's been a lot of fun. Do you want to jump to the next slide, Jeremy? Great. Okay, so I was trying to think of analogies for like the most important thing that we're trying to hold dear at NetBox as we're starting to become commercially involved here. And I kind of couldn't resist the RoboCop metaphor of the prime directive. So the prime directive for everything we do at NS1 with NetBox is to create a win-win for the open source community, the open source project, and NS1, which sounds fine, but like, what does that mean specifically? So the way we see it is that the open source community, the open source project, is at the core of everything we're going to do with NetBox, and it has to remain that way. It's our goal to create a virtuous cycle, a win-win, so that as we start to expand in our commercial offerings around NetBox, we can reinvest into the community. And let me talk through a few ways that you can expect that to impact the community and the open source project moving forwards. As we start to onboard engineers, we'd expect for the roadmap velocity to increase, right? So the features that you decide upon get triaged, prioritized, and built faster and back out into the open source. We're also going to be investing in documentation, how-to guides, and other resources to make it easier to succeed with NetBox. And we've already seen, every day I'm going into the community and thinking that question would make an excellent how-to guide, or that would make a great video, etc. You should expect to see a lot more of that. And we're currently hiring for our first role that I'm not going to spoil. I'll tell you about it next month. But that's somebody who's really going to be investing in figuring out where the pain points are and making sure that people who are using open source, who are not engaging with NS1 commercially, can continue to be successful with NetBox. There's going to be an increased focus on NetBox community building, right? So community calls like this one, more people to help out in the Slack channel and on GitHub, creating opportunities so you can share your experiences with the community through blogs and video and whatever it is. And we haven't really agreed this, but I think it'd be exceptionally good if we could do a NetBox conference at some point. So we're going to be looking at that as well. We're hiring into the NetBox team right now, which is going to help us to build out open source features much quicker, do these these community enhancements, documentation, how-to guides, and everything else, and then invest in NetBox Cloud. So I want to talk a little bit about what that is. Jeremy, could you skip ahead? Yeah, great. So NetBox Cloud was announced at the end of last year, and the response has been overwhelming. I can't remember the exact number, but lots and lots and lots of people have signed up to try and find out more. And we've already spoken to, I think, about 30 people since I joined. So 30 organizations, I should say, since January 4th. But one of the questions we keep getting is exactly what is it? And part of this is very clear right now. And part of it we're still working on. And the bit that we're still working on, we really need your help with. But let me start on the bit that's clear. So NetBox Cloud is a managed, highly available, single-tenant instance of NetBox with standard cloud SLAs. And if you've got questions about what any of that means, get in touch. So if you get a NetBox Cloud instance from us today through the early access program or through general availability, which is coming up, what you're going to get right now is the hosted, highly available, and single-tenant instance of upstream open source NetBox Core right now. We are investigating adding further cloud-specific features over time, and we're going to share more of those in later community calls. I think one of the things that I've noticed in my short time here and all the interactions we've had with various organizations is that upgrades tends to be a pain point for people. So when you buy NetBox Cloud, you're going to be able to also have automatic upgrades for you, or we're introducing the idea of an upgrade window where you'll be able to decide within a certain amount of time when you would like to upgrade, because we know that a lot of people using NetBox, especially at scale, have got all sorts of custom scripting going into that. They've got all sorts of integrations into that, plugins, etc. So having that window means that you have time to make sure that you've adapted all of those to work with the new versions. And again, if you need information about this, get in touch. And last is NetBox Cloud Support, which, as it says here, gives customers a way to get answers to implementation questions with a 24-hour first response SLA. The idea with cloud support is that it's built into NetBox Cloud. If you have questions around how to do something with the cloud product, or maybe it's a question about the best way to approach something given the flexibility that NetBox gives you, you can reach out to that and we'll get back to you. So that's a very high-level view of what NetBox Cloud is right now. There's a couple of things we're also considering, and this is why this is where we move into the feedback wanted part of the explanation. So, the funny thing for me was that when we did the announcement of NetBox Cloud in Q4 2021, an awful lot of people misused that form to say, okay, this is all fine, but what I really want is support. So we started taking that more seriously, and we had a conversation with a bunch of them, and we arrived at a couple of support options that we're considering and trying to shape right now that we think would be useful. The first is a NetBox Cloud migration support package. So it might be that you're running on-prem NetBox today, or perhaps you're using spreadsheets or you're using another tool, and you want to get onto NetBox Cloud, but you're not quite sure about how to do that. The NetBox Cloud migration support package that we're considering right now will basically be a services package from us to help you migrate over. So that's pretty easy to understand. The next one that we're considering is on-prem support for people who are just using the open source tool, right? Who don't want to use the cloud. They want to stay on-prem, they want it running themselves, but they need a little bit of help. And we're considering this through the lens of a few different things. People are telling us that they're perfectly fine doing it themselves, but occasionally they'd just like to know if they were doing it right. Something like a health check is one of the things that we're considering. Another one here is help around upgrades. As more things get integrated into these on-prem NetBox deployments, people are increasingly saying, how can I safely upgrade? And that's another thing that we're looking at. And then there's general support that would sort of be analogous to the cloud support, but from on-prem deployment. If any of those things are interesting to you, we're shaping them with the help of the conversations we've had so far right now. We'd love to add your voice to that process so we can make something that's going to work for you. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about NetBox and NS1. Thanks, Jeremy. So some of you will be familiar with the NS1 product family. If you're not, NS1 Connect is the name for the NS1 platform. It includes the existing tooling that's there. It makes a whole bunch of sense to do some sort of integration between NetBox Cloud and NS1 Connect. And a few of the people that we've spoken to have said they would be interested in that. So what we're doing right now is the initial investigation to figure out what that might look like. And we're expecting to have answers to share by the end of Q1. So hopefully I'll be able to come back to a community call, end of Q1, beginning of Q2, and explain what we've learned so far, where we're still looking for input, and what our plans are at that point. So I think the only thing that's left for me to say is this last slide here. Yeah, perfect. So so we just touched on the early access program. We're onboarding a whole bunch of people into the early access program right now. And just to explain how the early access program works, you can see the early access program as kind of like a proof of concept, right? It's the exact same NetBox Cloud that you would get through general availability if you were to enter into a contract with us. But it's a free testing period, so you can check that it works with your scripts, your integration, your single sign-on, everything else that you might need to use. If you're interested in that, you can go to getnetbox.io right now, sign up, and you'll get an email from me figuring out how we can onboard you into that. Last but not least, if you want to discuss support or anything else NetBox related, do get in touch. You can do that through Slack, or maybe we could just go back to those initial details for me, Jeremy, in the few slides back.
There we go. Oh.
Yeah, where was it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
there it is. Yeah. So you can use getnetbox.io, but also please feel free to reach out, like email, LinkedIn, Twitter, find us on Slack. Like I said, a lot of questions have been answered, but there's a lot of really interesting ones that we still need to answer, and we'd love to have your input to be able to do that. And that's
absolutely.
Now.
Great, thanks, Mark. It's been amazing to see how frequently people have reached out ever since I joined NS1 back in, I think, April last year. Feels like a month ago. Just about what our plans are for NetBox Core, for NS1 and NetBox, for integration. So it's a lot of really, really interesting stuff going on for sure. Cool. With that, let me switch gears a little for a minute and talk about what we're doing with the plugins framework working group. So if you don't know, back in when we were working on NetBox 3.1, not so long ago, one of the major initiatives of that release was to implement wireless network modeling, which had been on the plate for some time. And it was interesting because up until that point, NetBox has been informed mostly from my own experiences and knowledge about networking, network engineering in general, as well as community input. But this was the first topic that I had approached where I wasn't confident that I had a 100% grasp of it to begin with. I'm obviously familiar with wireless networking, but I've never been a wireless expert, right? It's never been my area of concentration. So the other maintainers and I said, let's reach out to the community. Let's leverage the community that we have to inform the design of wireless networking in NetBox. So we did that. So the feature request was 3979. And we decided to just model the working group after that. This is so really what happened was we had a bunch of people. We put out a feeler that said, hey, if you're a wireless networking expert and you'd like to contribute to NetBox, maybe you don't even have to know how to code, but if you let us pick your brain about how wireless networking should be modeled, reach out. And we put together a mailing list. I think we probably had about some between a dozen and 2 dozen. I don't remember the exact number offhand, but people signed up to the mailing list, and I would pose questions like, "Oh, okay, what about an SSID? How does that apply? Like, should we assign SSIDs to channels or vice versa? Things like that." Getting down to the very nitty-gritty detail about how to model wireless networking in NetBox, and we had a tremendous amount of feedback, and it worked out very well. And so, what you see in NetBox today, in version 3.1 and later, is the result largely of the discussions that happened in that working group. So, inspired by that, we said, all right, well, let's do the same thing with plugins, right? This is where I don't want to be making decisions in a vacuum or with just a few people, right? Let's involve the people who are actually building the plugins and get their feedback about what needs to be extended. Like we know off the bat, some things obviously need to go out there because of past feedback, but let's take a more proactive approach and reach out and get some people who have tried developing plugins in the past to provide feedback and say, okay, this is what I want. These are my pain points. This is what I think is missing. And oh, by the way, this would be cool too. So that's what we're doing right now. So we've set up a separate GitHub discussion group. We're not doing. Last time we did a mailing list. This time we're going to be doing it as a GitHub repo, experimenting with different platforms. And I think this one's working out a little bit better so far, just because it's less disjointed than a traditional mailing list. But if you would like to participate and you've got some experience having, writing or trying to write a plugin for NetBox in the past, by all means, drop a note on under the NetBox repo on GitHub. It's a discussion number 8338. Just drop a comment in there. You'll see a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, I want to be part of it. And we'll invite you to the group. And we're managing everything right now. It's just issues, and it's a pretty casual take on discussion. But already we've knocked out a bunch of stuff coming up in 3.2. I expect to do 3 or 4 other probably major areas of the framework in preparation of the beta. And then obviously once we have the beta out and accessible to people, then that's where the feedback really ramps up from not just the discussion group, but the general public. So very excited to see how that unfolds here in the run up to the 3.2 release. Maybe you don't care about plugins, but you still want to get involved. There's some other options out there. I take every opportunity I can to encourage people to participate. So I break these down into 2 categories: code contributions and non-code contributions. So on the code side, you probably know what to expect. We have a ton of issues in the backlog right now that have been tagged as just waiting for someone to work on them. So if you go to GitHub and you look at filter the issues list by the tag needs owner, or label rather, you'll find, I think, probably about 30 or so issues right now that are just waiting for someone to work on them. By all means, peruse through that list and see if you see anything that looks interesting, maybe within your skill set. And even if you think you might need some help, that's an option too, right? Myself and other individuals are always available on Slack and on GitHub to help out where needed. So, treat it as a learning experience, if nothing else. It's pretty easy to get started. Just find something that interests you. Like I said, have a peek at our contributing policy and the getting started guide. So that's in the NetBox application documentation. It's under the development section in there. That just runs through setting up a development environment. It's all pretty straightforward. And if you haven't already, join the NetDev Slack. That's at netdev.chat, and in the NetBox channel on that Slack, you'll find about 1,800 or so people have joined in the past, and there's always discussion in there. So no shortage of people offering to help. On the non-code contribution side, there's plenty of other ways to get involved, right? There's a documentation extension and updates. Maybe you don't know how to program, but so long as you can use Git, you can still contribute to the documentation. And anyone with reasonable technical writing ability is certainly welcome to participate there. Short of even that, just testing, right? Especially when we enter that beta cycle. So about every 30 to 60 days before a minor release. We're always looking for more people to help test, and you don't even have to. In many cases, you can just test on the public demo or the beta demo instances that we have up and running. We don't have a beta instance right now because we don't have a current beta release, but that will be spun up here soon, probably sometime next month. Just running through, can I validate bugs that people are reporting? Is there go through your normal workflow? Is there something that's kind of off or might be able to have less friction, things like that? And then there's just general community interaction. So on GitHub, the NetDev Slack, just hang out. And if you see people pose a question, that maybe they need help with something that maybe you might be able to help them out, by all means, that's a contribution as well, right? Everything counts. And finally, just if you want to subscribe to this YouTube channel for future community calls, and you'll get some other NetBox stuff that pops up. I'm really hoping this year will be the year I finally commit to producing regular content on YouTube that is more than just like me live coding, like over the shoulder style coding with NetBox, actually getting into like individual features and some better formed content for NetBox. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, with that, I think we've got a few questions that would have been submitted ahead of the talk. Let me pull them up. I apologize, I didn't have the time to put those onto slides. First one comes from Martin. The question is, do you plan on providing some official support for tools like the Ansible collection or PyNetBox? So first off, if you don't know, the tools he's referring to there are the Ansible inventory module for NetBox, which allows Ansible to utilize NetBox as an inventory source, and PyNetBox, which is our Python REST API client for NetBox. Both of these are hosted under the NetBox Community GitHub organization. They're not official parts of NetBox. They're not part of the product itself, but obviously very closely tied to it. It's always kind of tricky because it's a community project that we don't have, at least I don't have actual authorship or ownership of, so I can't guarantee that a change that I want to make will be made. However, we work very closely with these projects and with the maintainers of them. So, by all means, we'll do our best to make sure that they continue to work. Worst case scenario, we might be able to provide like instructions to maintain a local fork to address a specific issue if it's not addressable in core. But it seems like those situations would be pretty far and few between. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Next question we had was from Joe. For the SaaS offering, how will plugins be handled if I don't have access to the host NetBox is run on? Additionally, who validates and reaches out to plugin maintainers to fix plugins before upgrading the SaaS platform? So first part of that question is, we'll provide tooling that makes it possible to install plugins. Now, there's a caveat to that in that we haven't decided yet what plugins we'll be supporting, right? Because there's a spectrum of that. One is, on one end you have only plugins that are provided by NS1 that we can guarantee, the safety and reliability of those. And on the far end, you have people, allowing people to upload whatever custom plugins that they've devised. And somewhere in the middle, you have like community managed, possibly NS1 vetted plugins. So that's still kind of an open question, but whatever we decide, there will be tooling to do that. It's going to be a matter of selecting from a drop-down list of supported plugins, or uploading your own Python package, or specifying a library, that kind of thing. So that's something we're still actively working on. The second part of that was who validates and reaches out to plugin maintainers. So really the onus falls on plugin maintainers to specify a minimum and in some cases maximum supported version of NetBox for their plugins. Typically that'll be a minor release, so you might push out a plugin that says, okay, for this to work, you need NetBox 3.0 or later. Owing to dependencies on the UI or the plugins framework, especially with 3.2 coming out, things like that. And we'll try to keep an eye on that and provide some guidance. But ultimately, it does boil down to what that plugin is going to support. Obviously, for anything that NS1 provides as a plugin, we'll be responsible for that. We had another question down here. I don't know, Mark, do you want to take that one, or I guess I can take it?
Okay, sure. I mean, my main question is this a different Joe or the same Joe? But
it's also by Joe, yes.
You want me to take it?
Actually, I'll take. This is about the scheduling. Sorry. So the other question here was, I have a cron job, I guess, on a box to trigger NetBox reports and scripts on a schedule. How will this be provided in the SaaS offering? So this is a bit of a tricky question. Right now, we actually have an open feature request. It was only opened, I think, a couple weeks ago. It's number 8366, and that's basically to enable the scheduling of such jobs through NetBox. So, and this is where it's important to understand the distinction, or I guess in many cases lack thereof, between NetBox Core and the NetBox SaaS program. In NetBox Core, if we end up implementing a feature request 8366 and provide you some mechanism through the UI to schedule jobs, which is certainly feasible, then it would no longer be necessary to do that as part of the SaaS product. And this is where the roadmaps of the two products kind of overlap and become intertangled with one another, and that we don't really want to start down that road on the SaaS platform if there's going to be an opportunity to provide that in NetBox Core, right? The intent is not to siphon any features away from core development. Rather, the opposite is to encourage core development and apply and spend time and effort on the cloud offering only where it makes sense for the cloud environment. So I do think that's probably something we'll look at pretty soon. I want to say that Django, or what is it? The RQ library that we use to do the scheduling, I believe it supports some form of scheduling. Or I'm sorry, it's the library that we use to do the background tasks. So basically, when you go into the UI and you're clicking, you're submitting a script or report to run it, it's not running right away. It actually gets dropped into a Redis queue, and then the background processor works on it. In many cases, if there's just a couple seconds of delay, you'll kind of see that right away and don't even know that not even realize that it's getting background tasked. But I believe there's some form of scheduling that's supported today, and if not, that's something else we'll explore and see what our options are. But that's a great example of how features will pop into core and then make their way into the SaaS product, hopefully in the near future. So, All right, I think that's all we had for questions. That's right at 30 minutes. It's pretty good. I don't know, Mark, is there anything else you wanted to cover today or add?
No, I think that's it. I mean, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I had a quick look on the YouTube, and I think we got like 25 people watching, which beat my estimates. So that's good.
Cool. All right. Awesome.
I still might win the long tail views, the views one. But yeah, I think we did that pretty much on time. I think there may be a couple of questions we didn't get to, but don't worry, we will over time, and please keep them coming for future calls.
Yeah. So I'll just close it with saying thanks everyone who attended. It was thank you for spending the time to listen to me ramble on about NetBox, as I'm prone to do. And want to again say, just extend a public welcome to Mark, and I'm so thrilled to have him as part of the team. Thrilled to continue building out our team and continue to keep doing these community calls, because I think there's a good amount of interest in the community, and I like having the regular cadence and the opportunity to share things with people. I do think 2022 is going to be an amazing year for NetBox and NS1 both. So I'm very excited.
One more thing I want to add. There have been a few requests for input today, but one of them is around these community calls. Like, if you have feedback on things you prefer to see covered, should they be longer? Should they be shorter? Do you want to meet other people? Anything else, please let us know, right? You saw my email, Twitter, you can go into Slack. But yeah, we're shaping these at the same time as we're shaping the other things. So yeah, should they be more interactive? You let us know.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, with that, I'll wrap it up. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.